Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits Experiences video. Well, in this case, let's go ahead and let's share another frightful experience when it comes to the world of ghosts and spirits. This one, yet again, coming from the Reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called Real Ghost Stories. This one having to do not just with shadow people, but apparently noises and apparitions and even some kind of weird sensations that people are having within this household. It comes from a user by the name of No Economist 1871, and they aptly titled theirs as Childhood Home. It gives an eerie feeling because you never know essentially what's going to happen when you're living in your own home and you have these things going on around you. So let's go ahead and let's share this entry here, and then once again I'll give my own thoughts and comment on it afterward. So here's essentially what this user stated. Okay, so let me preface this by saying that the house I've lived most of the 22 years in was built by my mom on vacant land, so nobody has died here or anything. When I was younger, a lot of creepy stuff used to happen. Most nights I'd hear footsteps up the hall, followed by the typical 3 knocks you'd expect from a cheesy horror film. And occasionally the door would open too, and the footsteps would continue into my room, stop at my bed, and then leave down the long hall again. After years of this, I kind of got used to it. I never saw anything, only heard the footsteps, even back as a child. As a teen, I had friends over for a birthday sleepover, and halfway through a movie, I can't remember what we were watching, I glimpsed what looked like a solid shadow person in the hallway. I didn't say or do anything because I was 15 and kind of freaking out internally, but I glanced around quickly to see if maybe I was just going crazy and saw that the other girls were looking at it too. It sort of edged back until we couldn't see it anymore, and we all started freaking out and talking about what the hell was going on. After that, I started spotting solid shadows more frequently around the house and not just in the hallway. I also had a moment in the shower where I felt someone brush against me and then heard a breath in my ear that had me fly out the bathroom with a towel barely covering myself, dripping water throughout the house while we had company. Besides this, though, I eventually got to the point where for the most part, when I saw something, I'd just get up and leave the room. Basically like, nope, not dealing with that. Anyway, I moved out for a little bit after having my first kid in the house that only had 2 weird things happen in it, which I'll make for a separate post for. But after I had my second one, I was back at home again due to COVID, keeping me out of a job and my ex and I splitting. And so it's now been a few years of living here again, and I thought of weird stuff had started happening, but then a few months ago, I was home alone with the kids, and 3 knocks came from my bedroom door while nobody was home and the kids were with me. A few weeks after that, I saw a solid shadow pass by my window on the outside, and I quickly closed the curtains. My baby monitor is always getting triggered by nothing too, but the real reason I'm sharing this is because a week ago, I had to give a bottle to and change my 2-year-old youngest son at like 2 a.m. And he was looking past me and then asked, "Who is that, Mommy?" He was looking at the hallway where my bedroom is. I couldn't see anyone, so I was like, "Nobody, buddy." And he goes, "Not nobody, that man." And I got chills. I sort of just went down the line of, "Don't worry about it," and tucked him back into bed. It kind of freaked me out that my kids are now seeing this stuff here. Not to mention I had to then walk back down that hallway by myself in the dark. So yeah, not quite sure what I can do about it. I looked into the history of the area and the land, and nothing seems amiss. Doesn't make sense for all this strange stuff to be happening here. And then that's it. That's everything that this user, No Economist 1871, stated in their encounter. So let's go ahead and let's share some comments on that here. First off, it was interesting that they pointed out that this was a newly built home, because the first natural thing that anyone thinks is, how old is the home? Obviously, if there was been there since the 1800s, there's going to be a lot of people living there, potentially dying there. But no, in this case, it was built brand new by the person's mom, and presumably they lived there for most of their life, went away, but then came back to that home. And so from their experience, nobody died there, obviously, during that time. But that doesn't negate the fact that there was obviously other stuff that could have happened there before that person lived there. A battle of some sort, or maybe some other type of tragedy, murders, something else that could have occurred in that land before that house was built. That's just the first inclination. And then the second thing, that happening in their house, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that is pretty creepy. I go on a lot of ghost hunts. You've seen me do this, not just live, but in some of the special edition videos that I do. But the way I do that is I know that it's happening away, right? It's happening at another location. I get to go home afterward, and then I get to be free of that stuff. But just imagine having that the opposite. Imagine this now occurring at your own home. You can't escape it. That's the kind of stuff that would be truly creepy. It's more of that paranoia of, when is the next thing going to happen? And in this case of the user, it was footsteps followed by some kind of breath that they described, and then almost like a touching sensation, like a brush. And then it seemed to go into the extreme involving the shadow people, the actual shadow people that I mentioned in some of my past videos. And then the user stating that no, it wasn't just them. It was some of the other friends that also saw these shadow people. Crazy, crazy stuff. That's the kind of stuff, again, that would freak me out, because you never know when the next part of it will happen there. But now it looks like it's happening not just to them, but also the kids that they have there as well. We always read about children and then teens and preteens just having this weird sense, like where they can see and hear more than your average adult does, and when it comes to the world of spirits. And so something is happening still at that location, and it's causing the children to be able to see and hear them. Thus far, the good news is nothing seems to be bad, like no malevolent stuff, malicious stuff, stuff that's just dangerous. No, it just seems like these spirits are just roaming around that part. And then when that happens, it freaks them out. But that seems to be the biggest extent there. But otherwise, the children are definitely going to have to experience that until, let's say, they move away or go someplace else, and that'll be left them. There was a tease about this happening apparently at another home that the user had, but they mentioned that they're going to post it in another area. But overall, interesting stuff. No, kind of freaky whenever you read this and realize, what the difference it makes. If it's happening someplace else, it's fine, but if it's happening at your place, then obviously that makes quite a big of difference. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. What about those of you that live in a haunted house? I would love to hear what your own experiences are there. Some people have posted already in the comments, and I read them too, that it shows what they say has been occurring in their household. I love to hear what other people have to say about their own experiences. So if you have any, then please post it below, because I love to hear what that type of situation is. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye. Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits Encounters video. I thought I would mix this one in here while I'm continuing to do your mysteries and oddity suggestions. This one is a long tale, very detailed story involving an encounter with various paranormal aspects. So it seems like not only did this person encounter shadow people, but maybe even other items like demons and then other types of ghosts as well. This is a very, very long story, so this is a good way to test out and see if people like the longer stories themselves, or if the shorter ones are the best option to go. But once again, it comes from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called Real Ghost Stories, from a user called Noah D1992, and they titled theirs as Drugs, Demons, and Exorcisms. Interesting title, no, when it comes to this ghost story. So let's go ahead and let's share it here, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward. So here's what they stated. Beware, this is a long story. So this is a true story about drug addiction and dealing with demonic paranormal activity. A lot of the stuff might sound far-fetched or sound like it's from a corny movie, But these things really happened. There's a lot of other things that happened as well, but some of it could possibly be explained by other means, so I left a lot of things out. I basically only included the things that were obviously paranormal. It all started when I began dating a girl about 13 years ago. We were 15 years old and we lived right next to each other at the same apartment complex. Her mom would allow me to stay the night some nights and watch movies. Her mom was a heavy alcoholic and was also doing meth on and off, although we didn't know it at the time. The first paranormal thing that we experienced was we were up in one of the rooms upstairs. It used to be my girlfriend's room. The room next door to us was her little brother's room, but he never slept in there. We heard the door open and close a few times right in the row. It weirded us out, so we went into the room to look around. There was nobody in there. Windows closed, nobody in the closet, and like I said, this was on the second story. And so my girlfriend's little brother was 4 years old. His mom wasn't really the best mom and would allow him to watch the movie 13 Ghosts all day long. My girlfriend moved her room downstairs and her mom moved up to the second floor. As corny as it sounds, he would sit upstairs and walk by the room. He would sit upstairs and watch 13 Ghosts on repeat all day long, just rocking back and forth. You could go upstairs and walk by the room and he would be so stuck in that TV that he wouldn't even know you were there. Later on, he started to tell us that the walls were talking to him. I asked him what he meant and how he knows it's the walls, and he said because he can't see anybody there. My girlfriend had an aunt that had Down syndrome. She had the mental capacity of a 5-year-old and also happened to be obsessed with horror movies. And so she stayed the night one night and slept in my girlfriend's room downstairs. I was laying in the chair watching Surf's Up and my girlfriend was asleep on the couch. It was very early in the morning, like 2 or 3, and I started to hear her aunt talking in the back room. I was wondering why she was awake, and I turned down the TV to hear what she was saying. She was repeating the words, "No, stop, don't, I can't do it, I won't do it, stop it, leave me alone." And she was repeating it over and over and over. I shook my girlfriend awake and told her to listen. She listened for a little bit, and we both got freaked out, and so we left and went over to my house. Me and my girlfriend had a good friend that used to live in town with us, but he moved to a different town. In the summer, because we didn't see him much, he would come stay long periods of time at my girlfriend's house with us. Her mom would basically let us do whatever we wanted. Now, my mom didn't like him that much, so he would sleep over at my girl's house. I know that sounds weird, but it really wasn't. And one night while he was over, I awoke to a knock on the door at my apartment. And so I got up and it was them. They stated they wanted to stay at my house because something scared them. My girlfriend was sleeping and she woke up to a loud slam and then heard heavy footsteps running up the stairs. She yelled my friend's name who was sleeping in the living room on the couch, and he responded, "Did you hear that too?" And so it wasn't a person that did it. Fast forward a little bit, and my family had moved out of town into a different town nearby, and my girlfriend's family stayed in town but moved into a different house. At this point, I had become a drug addict. Not so much on the hard stuff yet, but definitely a drug addict and a garbage young adult with no job. We would stay at my girlfriend's mom's house until she got tired of us and kicked us out. And then we would go to my mom's house in the town nearby until she got tired of us and gave us the boot back over to my girlfriend's mom's house. The paranormal stuff began to increase, and it was no longer just at my girlfriend's mom's house. Whatever it was, I believe it was following us from place to place. So, while at my mom's house, these are the kind of things that started to happen. My sister was a young mom with 3 kids, 4 as the story progresses. Her and her husband and the kids were living with my mom. We all started to periodically hear babies crying. I know it sounds like a movie, but this stuff really happened. We could all be outside in the backyard, pushing the kids on the swings or doing whatever else, and then we would hear one of those babies fussing. One of us would go inside to check, sometimes my mom, sometimes me, and the babies would either be asleep or not even at the house and somewhere else with my sister. The whole family was hearing this, even my extremely Christian mom. My oldest niece, who was maybe about 5 years old at the time, started talking a lot about the quote-unquote the man in the closet and was too scared to sleep with the closet door open. One night she told my sister, "Mommy, it was dark in your room last night." And my sister responded with, "Yeah, baby, it was nighttime." And then my niece said, "No, it was darker than normal." And then told my sister, "The giraffe with the mad eyes wanted to hurt Daddy." These were things that she was claiming she was seeing. Just a quick side note, we just found out last year that their quote-unquote daddy had been molesting the girls for some time and he's now in prison. I feel that that's relevant. And so I began to become obsessed with this thing in our house, almost like I was constantly thinking about it. I kept telling my mom, there's something in the house, but I never stopped talking about it. Finally, my mom said, "I believe that there's something in the house, but I feel like whatever it is really focused on you." And so after she told me that, I broke down and began crying because it was like something clicked in my head. This thing is everywhere I go, and I feel like it's because of me. Now, there was occasions where I was laying on the couch watching TV, and out of the corner of my eye, I could see the silhouette of a person/shadow peeking around the corner from the kitchen. I would turn my head, and there would be nothing there. I hadn't said anything about it yet, until one day my sister, my girlfriend, and I were all talking about the paranormal stuff in the house. My girlfriend said, "When I'm laying on the couch, it's like I see somebody peeking around the corner at me, but when I look, there's nothing." And so my sister and I both gasped at the same time because we had seen the very same thing. The only difference is my sister saw something, turned her head, and then caught whatever it was quickly walk around the corner, and then nobody was in the kitchen. I should take this time to explain that everybody in the house, aside from my mom, had become a drug addict at this point. None of us were on meth yet, so these weren't any hallucinations or paranoia. If you're familiar with drugs, you understand that smoking pot or popping pills doesn't cause you to hallucinate crazy things like these. Whatever this thing was, it seemed like it really started to become strong, like a poltergeist. This is where it became very prominent and was letting us know it was definitely there. One pretty intense thing that I remember at this house was the morning my friend and I came into the house after doing a paper route. It was fairly early. We came into the door and heard dishes being slammed around in the kitchen. This was the same kitchen where we all saw this shadow person. Like I said, my mom is a very Christian woman. She loves Jesus, but sometimes when she was aggravated from arguing with me or my sister, she would angrily knock dishes around while she was cleaning. My first thought when I walked into the house and heard the dishes being slammed around was that my mom must be pretty pissed right now. And so we walked around the corner and froze. Nobody was in the kitchen. My friend said, "You heard that, right?" And I responded with, "Of course." And so I opened the pantry door and no one was there. This was very intense. It wasn't like a mouse infestation. I've had mice in different houses and we never had that issue in this house. It also wasn't like a stack of dishes fell over when we walked in. It was very obvious that the dishes being slammed around in the kitchen was done for a period of probably 10 seconds. It was like things were angrily being moved from place to place. And so when we walked around the corner, it abruptly stopped. So during this whole period of time, we were moving back and forth from my mom's to my girlfriend's mom's house. When we would go to my girlfriend's mom's house, the paranormal stuff continued to happen there. It always felt like someone was watching you in the bathroom. It's easy to dismiss that, except I've had multiple friends tell me the same thing when I hadn't mentioned it. We would be doing drugs at night on the shed, on the porch, and then hear the screen door and footsteps. We'd look out and there would be nobody. A Cheerio was thrown into the bathroom when my friend was in there, and everyone was in the living room at the time. And so a friend of mine who was a skeptic and didn't believe us was over smoking spice with us one night. We had all smoked a bowl, sat down the pipe, and sat there quietly spacing out. Out of nowhere, two big knocks/slams on the kitchen wall right next to us caused my friend to reevaluate his skepticism. They were loud and aggressive. Now, this is where the hard drugs come in. Make of this what you will, but this is what my friend told me he saw. My friend Kenny was also like a brother. His dad had gotten my girlfriend's mom pregnant, and they had a kid. Kenny was my friend before this, and then we all became family. His dad married my girlfriend's mom, who is basically a second mom now. They ended up getting divorced, but we all had lived in the house together for a while. Kenny still came over and stayed all the time at my girlfriend's mom's house with us, and she was like a mother to him too. He began using meth and fentanyl a lot. He would come down off of a runner, come over to our house, and eat all of the food because he hadn't eaten in days. Because of this, my girlfriend and her mom told me that I had to tell him he couldn't keep staying the night. One night he came over and I told him, "You can't stay here, bro." He begged me to stay and told me he was scared to sleep at his house. I asked him why, and this is what he told me. He said he was high on meth, and it all started with his extension cord being tugged on. And so this is what he said. "I got up and walked from my room into the living room and looked out the window. It was getting dark outside, and the shadow of what looked like an old woman hunched over with a blanket draped over her was standing in the yard. I walked out into the yard, and there were these two skinny little things running around her that kind of looked like kids. I hollered, 'Hey, what are you doing over there?' And whatever this was turned towards me. I couldn't see the face as it was all a shadow, but it turned in my direction. In my peripheral vision, these were the ones kind of dancing around, moving side to side like they were messing with me. They would get really close to me, and then I would turn towards them, and they would be back by the truck, moving around like that. I realized they were demons, so I went and I grabbed my Bible. I came outside and said, 'You can't hurt me because I have this.' And so I went back into my room and looked out the window. There were shadows all over the yard, some behind the trees that were very tall, making it look like the trees were shaking. Some were rolling around on the ground like they were trying to be sneaky. And the ones that got closest to me were at the foot of my window. They were the only ones that had eyes. They looked like little imps with yellow eyes that were looking up at me from the ground. All of that happened, and then it ended with my extension cord being tugged on as well. Remember, that's the story he told me. This wasn't my experience. He told me this, so I said, "Okay, you can stay, bro." And with all this crazy stuff happening and the drugs taking us over, we decided to go to church together and give our hearts to Jesus. This story isn't being used to convert anyone. It's just what happened. Anyway, that Sunday we went up to get prayed for. We fist bumped each other and said, "Let's do this together," as we were both nervous. At church, we were both still using drugs. I wasn't on meth yet, but we were both still using, and we were trying to hold each other accountable, but still really struggling. That next Sunday, he came by in the morning and asked me to go to church with him and his dad. I made up a lie and said I was going to go with my mom, even though I knew I wasn't. And so after church, Kenny came over and asked me if I would give him a ride to the nearby town to get some money so he could get some fentanyl. I told him no, and he got frustrated with me. I told him to ask my girlfriend, and if she said yes, I would go. He didn't ask her, he just left, and that was the last time I ever saw him. I felt a very strong draw to go to the church that night. I went alone as there was some pastor there that I had never seen. And so I was sitting towards the back as he was preaching, and I was thinking certain things in my head. I was questioning certain things about God, and then on two separate occasions, this man looked me in the eyes and answered the questions that I was asking in my mind. He then pointed at me and said, "Someone over here needed to hear that." And so I began sobbing, and that night I really fully gave my heart to God, and I was still crying by the time I got home. And I was telling my girlfriend about the experience I had had while we were sitting in the bathroom. We both felt cold chill, and then all of a sudden, it was like I couldn't take a deep breath. It got so bad, I thought I needed to go to the hospital. I puked in my mouth, and we went and sat on the couch trying to calm down. The feeling finally went away, and I fell asleep. The phone rang the next morning, and my friend Shadow was at the house with me and my girlfriend. Shadow answered the phone and said, "What? How?" And so he turned to me and said, "Kenny is dead." That night, Kenny had overdosed and died on fentanyl in his bedroom. I don't know if this has anything to do with me not being able to breathe and puking that night. I'm not saying it does, but I'm just saying it all happened on that very same night. It was just kind of strange. And so I broke all of my pipes, and to try to get sober after losing my best friend, I was still struggling, but I had a new outlook on life and a true desire to serve God. Fast forward just a little bit, and my girlfriend's mom finds a boyfriend who also happens to be an addict and alcoholic. Go figure. And so we move into his house, and the paranormal stuff continues there. I start praying every day, reading my Bible, and riding my bike into town to find a job. I'm still doing drugs and drinking, but I'm really trying my best to stop. The last paranormal thing that we experienced was getting up in the morning to get ready for work. My girlfriend and I walked into the bathroom to grab our clothes, and then the button on the TV clicked on, and the TV turned on in front of us. It was an old school tube TV. We immediately knew it was paranormal, but we were so desensitized to the stuff, it didn't really faze us that much. It was just like, whoa, that was crazy. And on we went with our morning. I've gotten sober for 3 years and was going to church regularly, and I married my girlfriend. We moved into our own house and didn't experience any paranormal stuff again for that entire time. I ended up slipping back into drugs after this period of time, divorced my wife, became a heavy alcoholic and pill addict, and then eventually found my way into heroin and meth. This was something I said I would never do again after losing Kenny. But as soon as I introduced the drugs back into my life, the paranormal stuff began again. I was working with developmentally disabled adults. My participant was in a wheelchair, and when I put him into bed, I would bring girls over to his house, have blank with them on his hide-a-bed, and then also do heroin. I was sitting with a girl on the hide-a-bed, and my giant gauge earrings were sitting on the arm of the couch behind the bed. It was very flat and sturdy, and so we were sitting there watching TV, not moving at all, and all of a sudden, one of my gauges flies off the couch and hits the wall. I started freaking out and saying, "Did you see that?" She was freaking out too, and we couldn't stop talking about it. I did what any rational person would do and shook the arm off the couch to see how sturdy it was, even though I knew we couldn't knock it off. And so I went and grabbed my gauge and put it back on the couch by the other one, laid back down and started thinking to myself, that'd be crazy if it happened twice. And no kidding, it flies off the couch again. This stood out to me so much. It was just so crazy. This happened right in front of my eyes, and despite everything that I had already seen, it was so unbelievable. While I was on the drugs, I was constantly having thoughts of blowing my head off. It was like I could see it in my mind, me putting a gun in my mouth and then blowing off the top of my head. And so I started using meth, and of course I would see shadows regularly. Whether you not believe the shadows you see on meth are just from being up that long or actually seeing demons, you definitely see a lot of stuff. So this is the craziest part of the whole story. You can call me crazy, call me a liar, but this is what happened. It's the craziest experience of my whole life. I ended up going to prison for 3 years for trafficking heroin. I turned my life around, got out at the age of 27, and became a licensed pipe fitter, a certified personal trainer, and walked away from the drugs until beginning to abuse kratom. I definitely turned my life around, but there were a lot of things from my past that were still lingering. I was really dealing with hate and rage. Serious fate rage. And I started getting these weird, unexplainable evil feelings. Like if I bought something and then came out to $6.66, I would get this feeling almost like I liked it, but in a dark and evil way. Or when I would have blank with my girlfriend, I would take off my cross necklace because it would swing around and I would get that same bad feeling. It's an unexplainable feeling. The only way I could describe it was that it felt demonic. Then I started having dreams that there were demons in me. Well, my friend encouraged me to get prayed for, and I finally decided to do it. As the day I was going to get prayer was approaching, I had another dream that someone was trying to pray for me, and in real life, I woke up growling and jumping to the other side of the couch to get away. It was hard for me to believe that there were demons in me, but I didn't know what to expect. I kept an open mind, but really doubted it. Well, they began praying for me, and my body locked up. I was screaming, growling, and moving like a snake. This was not my doing. It was like I've lost control of my own body and something very evil took hold of it. I went through hours of this until I was so physically worn out I couldn't take any more. My body was so sore from fighting over it. There's not much else to say about that experience other than it was freaking crazy, and it was so hard to believe it was happening. Afterward, I just cried and cried. Just to know I had been living with this thing in me was so hard to come to terms with. I actually have a video of it, and it's so foul looking. It's like something out of a horror movie. Since going through that, my life has changed in a huge way. I still have my struggles, but there's things about me that just changed immediately. I don't know for sure, but I believe that whatever thing or things that were in my house had gotten inside me. I truly believe that opening yourself to drugs brings a lot of nasty stuff with it. When you're using drugs and you let them take over your mind and you become a bad person, it's a recipe for the demonic. Anytime that I was sober and I had God in my life, these things ceased, but they were pretty quick to come back anytime I began to use. I personally believe that back before prison, when I was on heroin, is when this spirit came into me. That's when I began picturing suicide and became someone else. It all started with me living in the house of an alcoholic and drug addict, and then me and everybody around me becoming drug addicts, and all of our lives fell apart. Thank you for reading this. And that's it. That's everything that this user mentioned in their very, very long story. So lots of stuff to talk about here, right? Let's go ahead and let's focus on that. First off, yes, the big elephant in the room is a lot of this paranormal stuff. Could it have happened during these induced states? In other words, the various level of drugs that they were taking. He went through many paragraphs of that involving him taking it, involving his family taking it, involving his friends taking it as well, all through the lowest levels to what he called the hard stuff afterward. One can't help but think, right, how much of it was truly in his head and then how much of it was really happening. It's hard to say because even he admits it later on that, take that some of this stuff, it can create that type of situation. With him being the only witness describing it in this story, one has to take it on at least some grain of salt. But at the same time, I do believe he's right about that when it comes to taking those drugs. If it's not in his head, it does open people up to those type of scary encounters. There's something about keeping your mind, let's say, open and unsharpened. What's the word I'm looking for? Where it's more on the lines of if you're keeping a wall around your mind, it prevents things like that from happening. But if you're taking these drugs and it opens your mind without any defenses or anything like that, then that's where these things can occur. I think there's a link to that too when it comes to nighttime, when it comes to dreaming. You're in that induced state, that natural state, where your body is there, your mind is there, but it's very open, like it's almost like in a screensaver mode, and whatever wants to be able to interfere with it can do so, but just at that level. I think that's the closest parallel that I can give here. So big red flags, obviously, with him taking all of those drugs, but whether it's him experiencing it just in his mind because of those drugs or whether they're really happening to him, it's hard to state. That story, though, involving his friend seeing that quote-unquote old lady with those little kids running around, and then obviously all of a sudden all these other shadows outside, that was pretty creepy. That definitely made my skin jump up a little bit, like the hairs on my skin, because one could just experience this type of elevated circumstance where all of a sudden it's having that mindset of just being out there in the drugs, and having these things open to be able to come in that realm, whatever he was at the time. They were then at a place where they could see him and he could see them, as opposed to somebody that wasn't taking those drugs being in a level where they wouldn't be able to do so. Just my own thoughts and opinions on there, but I do believe there is a link towards that. And then he was talking about getting away from those drugs and then how these things kind of stopped. Like the activity was still somewhat there, but at the same time it was much less. And then finally, it seems like when he's sobered up and clean, at least as of now, this user has now been in a place where he's not experiencing it. Now, did it get to the point too where he was wanting to commit suicide? He was blaming that fact too, as far as him being in such a dark place with whatever these things were that they caused him to get to that level. I think that there's a possibility of that too. Plus the idea that in his induced states, it allowed whatever these things were that were in this house, several houses in fact, to jump into him. Talk about that. That's an interesting angle there. The idea that he had his own little mini exorcism as well. He didn't say who was praying for him. I'm guessing it was his friends, or who knows, something else, something more angelic or something along those lines. Whatever it was causing this thing inside him, or possible things, to escape and get out, or causing them to be forced to get out. And so that's where things just took a different turn towards the positive. Lots of things again to talk about, but it's hard to grasp any concrete evidence. It still could be just something that he's stating that happened to him, or it could have really, really occurred. But still, it's up to for yourselves to decide. But lots of interesting things too. I wish though the angle involving drugs that wasn't there. If that wasn't there and this was truly happening to him or his friends just on their own, that's a whole different story. But the fact that so many of these paragraphs were just involved just with drugs, pills, alcohol in other cases, it's just hard to hide that elephant in the room, especially when it comes to the idea that a lot of this wasn't happening to him, or could have been happening to him. But anyways, just my own thoughts. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and let me know if you like these really long-winded stories too, or if you'd like for me to just focus on the smaller ones. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.